to order. And our first agenda item is the minutes
Recording in progress.
from February. Does anyone have any comments on the meeting minutes from February?
In the area here where we talk about the ordinance for home-based businesses, in the first paragraph, we say a change needed to Lewis's ordinance was to not list what is permitted and to list businesses that are permitted along with standards. We don't list the businesses that are permitted.
Correct.
So it should be, and not list businesses that are permitted, okay?
Correct. We can make that minor change. We'll let Jackie know.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other comments on the minutes? Okay, would anyone like to make a motion on the amended minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes as amended. Just a
I'll
moment
second.
ago.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Second item is unfinished business. Discussion and possible recommendation to the mayor and city council regarding the proposed Meadow Ordinance from the Environmental Subcommittee.
So if you recall, you saw this last month, thought this was a good idea, and this was moving forward to mayor and council, but it was suggested that it actually come back for a formal motion from this because there was a formal motion from the Environmental Subcommittee, which is a subcommittee from the Planning Commission. Even though this section of code is not under the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission, it was recommended that it come back just to get a formal recommendation from the Planning Commission.
Okay, so there were no changes to it?
There were no changes.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion then?
Can we read the recommendation again? Just to be clear.
Janelle, can you read it?
So it's the same recommendation that was as last time. It's an amendment to chapter 148, which is the property maintenance section of the code, which is looking to allow for the use of meadow gardens within the city of Lewes. This would, because again, I know some of it shows up in black and green, black and blue. Everything pretty much is all new. This is not in an ordinance format. This is just informational that when it gets to mayor and council, it will put in an ordinance format. But it defines what a meadow garden is. It provides management of plant and meadow gardens. So there's management information. It allows them to be more than 10 inches in height, because right now the tallest grass can be grass or plant growth in your yard can only be 10 inches. If it's over that, then the city will send you a letter saying, hey, you need to cut your yard, your lawn, and it needs to come into compliance. So this was an alternative that was discussed at the Environmental Subcommittee, and you guys discussed the last meeting and were supportive of this and suggested that this move forward. And that's what this does.
Okay, so do we have, again, motion?
I move that we approve this as the subcommittee recommendation that was included in our packet.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, thank you. Next item, discussion and possible recommendation to the mayor and city council regarding the final plan for S-1-22 Roosevelt Landing, a major subdivision for the creation of 8 lots and site improvements. Property is located at 660 Pilot Town Road, and it's zoned R2 and OS.
So just for everybody's clarification, this was the last subdivision to come in through the previous subdivision code. It was submitted when the previous subdivision code was in effect, so it is going through and using those rules and regulations, which is why it has a lower open space requirement, which is why the open space across the street is being used. This is also using the lot averaging section of the code, which is why some of the lots, while it is zoned R2, are 7,500 square feet and others are larger, because it is using that lot averaging section in the code, which is allowed per this. What this is doing is what the previous subdivision code said is, Planning Commission's already granted preliminary consent, said, go get all your agency approvals, come back. When you have all your agency approvals, and you're in compliance with all your conditions of approval, we'll verify conditions of approval and compliance with agency approvals, and then you make the recommendation to mayor and council. So that's what they're here tonight. They do have all agency approvals, with the exception of the DelDOT entrance permit. They cannot get a DelDOT entrance permit because DelDOT will not issue an entrance permit for a plan that does not have approval yet, which is why and this has happened to every subdivision that has previously went through this process. It's like a catch-22. The code says, well, you have to give us an entrance permit, but DelDOT's like, you don't have an approved plan. We're not going to give you a permit that says you can go build without an approved plan. So they're asking for relief from that one requirement, but they are in compliance with every other section and have every other agency approval. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions?
I do. Janelle,
Yes.
I'm taking for granted all the conditions have been met as well that were set forth.
Yes,
Okay.
and the conditions are noted on the record plan, and they did bring back that one condition regarding the stormwater management, and they provided that updated note is also on the record plan regarding the understanding of what that note represents. Please understand, this will now, if you recommend approval of the final plan to mayor and council will hold another public hearing and actually have the final say on the final plan. So this is not the finalization of this subdivision plan. It's just moving forward with this plan.
Can I make just a, I'm not sure if this would be appropriate, and feel free to say no, but we have so many new people who did not vote on this. I think only a few of us were here. Would it be helpful to any other planning commission members to review the waivers that we've granted or the conditions and kind of status update us on that? I don't know if anyone else feels that way.
So I think the good thing would be is to verify if because I did send out an email and Alex
Yes,
did
received and
remind me,
saw.
is that if you were not on the planning commission at the time of this public hearing, if you can please verify that you did go back and watch the public hearings and you reviewed all of the information, so that then allows you to vote on this application.
I did, Janelle.
So did I. 3 meetings.
Hearing was the August
17th. Yes, it was in August, yes.
Yeah, actually, there was one before even that.
There was a lot of meetings regarding this application.
Yeah, I reviewed it.
I reviewed it.
Madam Chair, I'm the new kid on the block.
Very new,
And-
welcome.
Let me just put on the record that in the 1 week since I have officially been on the commission, I spent 4.5 days in New York City celebrating my anniversary. And so between the several hundred pages in this record and the several hours of hearings, I did not review all of this, so I'm going to recuse myself.
Okay, thank you very much. So it sounds like, per Alex, my understanding is 8 members are available to vote based on what I have heard, that Mr. Thompson, Mr. Wolf, Mr. Keene, Ms. Maddie, and Mr. Priori have all stated that they have reviewed and listened to all the record and the testimony in the public hearings, and the other members were on the commission at the time of the hearing and were present. Thank you.
So I have some questions relating to issues that were raised at the time by the commission, things that were left a little bit up in the air. Is it now that I can ask these questions, or are we going to have a debate later? What's the process?
I believe we're only reviewing the items that are shown here. So,
Okay, that are shown here, so, sorry, I have to get the minutes out, to get the agenda out again.
there is the plan.
Yeah, which is
So-
that very thick, 300 pages stuff, right?
So just for verification, most of what was in the packet was the archaeological review, because that was like 500 plus pages, because I wanted to make sure you guys had a copy of that, because that was one of the items that was requested as part of this application, was the archaeological review, which unfortunately or unfortunately did not find anything of significance or much on the site. So that allows them to keep moving forward with the development.
Janelle, I have a question. Under the old code, did that include dark sky lighting or not?
It did not.
It did not, okay.
It did not.
I couldn't find what, okay.
Okay. Now, one of the questions I had was on that you guys discussed at length, was at the drainage. And there was an issue of the elevation and the way that that elevation should not result in the neighboring properties being flooded when water falls on the property, and also the questions of the evacuation of the rainwaters towards the canal. And that was not clear from what I watched, how all this was resolved. I was under the impression that the developer was going to submit a more detailed presentation of how the rainwaters were going to be evacuated from the property.
At this point in the application, it's really ensuring that there's a complete application submitted. Going back to 2022, when the public hearing took place and the deliberations on preliminary consent took place, that's the real opportunity to ensure the plan complies with the zoning code in chapter 170. So the applicant's engineer and also the city's engineer submitted reports, so I'm not sure if there's any questions you have about their reports. They can answer that. That might be able to help.
Okay, all right. So we are going to have an opportunity to revisit all this later on, basically.
No.
No?
No. At the time, we were concerned about, as I recall, what was running off the property, and what the developer's engineer represented was that, in fact, there would be less
Yes, I
runoff
remember that.
because there would be less impervious on the site than the current building and
Yes.
pavements.
But I was under the impression that the developer was going to submit some documentation showing how that was going to be achieved, something relating to the configuration of the land, the swales, and these type of things.
I think our engineer might
Yeah,
speak
that
to
has been shown, in the plans. So they
Okay.
submitted a detailed grading plan that we
And
reviewed.
you are satisfied?
We are satisfied.
You're satisfied that
Yep.
this will take care of it? Okay, all right. So thank you. So that's one of the questions I had. In any event, the city council will have an opportunity to revisit all this, right?
The city council will schedule a public hearing, assuming there's an action taken today, yeah.
Okay.
And just to be clear, because I went over today to look at the maps that were for our benefit at City Hall. And condition J for approval says, provide individual lot grading plans to ensure the grading does not negatively impact the development and neighboring properties. The lot grading shall be reviewed and approved by the city engineer. So is that what you're referring to, Andrew?
That is what I'm referring
Okay.
to. They made a detailed plan of every lot as one sheet, but they put in all the final grading for each lot.
Yeah, thank you.
So I also noted some statements that were made by the developers in the material that was submitted during the presentation to the previous Planning Commission configuration. And one of them was a comment which was made in the Pennoni letter of June 6, where it said that no hazardous materials were definitely identified during the environmental site assessment, and that no sampling was performed. However, and I continue quoting quoting here, based on the age of the subject property building, it is possible that it was constructed with hazardous building materials such as asbestos-containing materials, lead-based paints, etc. And then the report concluded hazardous materials are out of the scope of ASTM E 152713 and are considered a business environmental risk. So I understand that. But still, at this point, I have a question. Since your submission, and now I'm asking the question from the developers, since your submission of the Pennoni letter of June 6th, or at any time before that date, has the existing building ever been tested for the presence of asbestos, lead-based paint, or other hazardous material? And if so, what were the results? And I know that this is dealing with decommissioning and hazardous material is not within the purview of the Commission, but since the material was submitted as part of the documentation that we had to review, or the Commission had to review at the time, it was basically brought into under our jurisdiction. Additionally, if no test was performed, will the building be demolished? And now that is a question for the city engineer. Will the building be demolished using measures to protect the city's environment against the dissemination of or contamination by lead-based paint, asbestos, dust, and other hazardous materials? So what is the downstream process here? So some questions were for the developers and some questions were for you.
Alex, I'd like to know if this kind of question is appropriate at this time.
So as the chair, you could decide whether to entertain these questions. The developer's here if you'd like the developer to speak, but we're not taking in new evidence at this point. The record is closed. It's been closed since fall 2022. So if you want clarifications, we can do that.
It's clarification. I'm not asking for the documents to be presented and entered into the record. I just want to know if certain procedures took place.
So a building permit, when a building permit comes in, the building permit application does ask if there's asbestos in the building. And if there is, we ask for an asbestos report. And we ask that to be submitted as part of the building permit so we can verify that it is done, as any asbestos or hazardous materials are removed in accordance with state regulations.
Is it a building permit or a demolition permit?
Demolition permit, still a building permit. You want to get a sign permit, it's a building permit. Everything's they all fall under the main category as a building permit.
Okay.
So if you just you just put on the building permit that it's for demolition.
Okay, so you sort of responded with the chicken and egg type of response, because you said if there is asbestos in the building, then we will ask for precautions, basically. But how do we know if there is asbestos in the building unless the city requires for the building to be tested for asbestos?
The city does not require the building to be tested. The city does actually have an asbestos report, and there is asbestos in this building, and because they've tried to get a building permit to tear down the building, but they cannot because they do not have an approved plan, so they cannot tear down the building, which we will not release a building permit for until they get final subdivision approval, so they can then start construction and demolish the building.
Okay, so there is asbestos in the building.
They're in portions of the building.
So there has been some
And
sort of
DENREC,
testing.
and they will have to go through the DENREC and the state's requirements to ensure that proper abatement is complied with.
Okay, and that applies to lead paint also, lead-based paint.
They will comply with all state requirements for any environmental items.
Okay, well, then additional question, does the state have a testing requirement for lead-based paint?
I cannot answer that. I do not know that. It's a state requirement. It is not a city requirement.
Okay, so
And that's not something the city gets involved in.
well, I think this is something that the Planning Commission, as an advisor to the City Council, has to make a recommendation on. If we cannot rely on just the fact that the state may or may not implement a lead-based paint requirement, particularly if there is no such requirement. I mean, and at the same time, we cannot afford, since the material that was submitted to us indicates that there was no testing so far, we cannot afford to make a recommendation to the city council without asking the city council to ensure that the building is tested for the presence of lead-based paint. Otherwise, during demolition, since the city engineer and the city planner considers that we have no jurisdiction, or the city has no jurisdiction on this, we run the risk that lead dust is going to fly all over the city and deposits on the buildings and in the environment. So somebody needs to coordinate with the state and make sure that it's taken care of. I don't care if it is the city who takes care of it or if it's the state, but somebody needs to make sure that it is taken care of one way or another.
Terry, as just part of a discussion, I'm just going to add that I see your point of view and that it is challenging because in these disclosures, it is owner reported in general, and I think this is an unusual property because it is a commercial property. Usually when we're dealing with demolitions, we're dealing with a smaller residential home. We deal a lot with this on H Park, much more so because just the procedure and often what happens, non-contributing homes being demolished. It's not something that we deal with all the time on subdivisions. So I don't think it's something that we focused on. And, I know unfortunately we cannot focus on it now. But
that's where
I do understand where you're coming from on this. And my guess would be that we probably don't have great legislation for it in Delaware because a lot of our Delaware regs are passed down at a county level, and Sussex County unfortunately has the weakest in the state. So that would be my opinion. As an individual.
But the Planning Commission has a general duty to advise the council on matters which are within basically the general jurisdiction of the city council when it comes to building and subdivisions and so forth and so on, and demolition. And here, for the first time, we're dealing with the decommissioning of a potentially contaminated building. So I think we would be remiss in our obligation if we don't provide the city council with an advice to ensure that the issue of lead-based paint and asbestos, incidentally, but I understand it is under control, lead-based paint at least is being addressed properly and that the residents are being protected. As you said, this is not enough often that we deal with the decommissioning of an industrial building, but here that's what we're dealing with.
If I can for a question, just a clarification. So there's nothing that can come into public comment today or take action on a public comment to modify this, but I thought I heard that there's going to be another public hearing chaired by the council, and it would seem like that would be an appropriate time to make sure that that's brought up and handled accordingly at that time. And it seems to me that that's the next best place, because we can't go backward, but we have an opportunity to go forward.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we go back. I'm suggesting that at this point there is something that should have been done at the time and that was not done and should be taken care of and rectified. And yes, I understand that as a private citizen I will be able to make comments during the hearings at the city council, and I will certainly do so. But I'm not talking here as a private citizen. I'm talking here as a member of the Planning Commission and what I feel is the duty of the Planning Commission, which is the duty to advise the city council. And here we cannot simply say, oh, as a member of general public, the members of the Planning Commission will have an opportunity to speak at the hearing, therefore we are washing our hands as a Planning Commission. That is not an acceptable way of dealing with the problem. So I would like the Planning Commission to make a formal recommendation to the City Council that the issue of lead-based paint be looked at during the permitting process and approval process by the city of the overall project.
Thierry, are you making a motion?
Yes, I'm making a motion to that effect. So I make a motion that the Planning Commission recommends to the City Council that the issue of the presence of lead-based paint in the building, or the potential presence of lead-based paint in the building, be looked at by the city building manager and the city administration, and that they coordinate with state agencies to ensure that proper testing and proper protection measures are taken at the time of decommissioning of the building.
I think that's a good recommendation, and I would second that.
So just to be clear, that's a condition right now. Is there an underlying recommendation of approval to send this plan to mayor and city council, or is that going to be addressed
No,
separately?
this is separate. We are sort of off agenda in a sense. I'm not making this a condition of approval. I'm making this a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the City Council, and I take it that the city administration, the city planner, the city building manager will follow up on that recommendation, and that the matter will be taken care of. I'm fully confident in that.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. We'd like to take a vote then. All in favor?
I would for my motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
What did I just, wait, did you just say he withdrew his motion?
No.
No, I
You thought so too, didn't you? Yeah.
didn't
I was
say
like,
that.
not on this end of the table, it sounded like you said you withdraw your motion, and everybody went, what?
No. I simply said that I am not making it a condition of the approval
Right,
of
we-
the.
Right.
We heard that.
This is just a recommendation to the city council that as they consider this going forward, that they look into this matter,
And that the city administration be directed to coordinate with state agencies to ensure that proper testing and protection measures are implemented at the time of demolition.
that's a recommendation.
Okay, I just have a comment. Janelle, this would come up with every demolition in the city, correct? Of a house, which we know most of the houses here have asbestos in them and lead paint.
So as,
Well, I'm trying to see, this isn't an isolated incident. If this is part of the building permit, whether it's voluntary or required, you run into this potentially with any house getting a permit that they want to demolish, correct?
depending on the
building,
age
anything.
of the house,
Right.
you can run into the risk of certain materials being
Right.
located within a house, that you will have to go through a state process to ensure and go through the state testing processes and get the state, because the state has identified the contractors who you can use to remove asbestos. And I don't know about lead, because they have identified, because they've gone through the proper work to go through, to do the remediation.
I guess my concern is this affects every old house on the beach being demolished, because they're all basically early 1900s, and any building in that era, correct?
Yes.
No,
This
yeah.
requirement.
My recommendation deals only with industrial facilities. I'm not addressing anything relating to individual homes.
But what I heard is there's a process from state agencies to do just that based on getting a building permit. Is that the
Well,
way I understood it?
on asbestos, I heard Janelle basically say that it was tested and there will be remediation measures taken. On lead paint, I heard Janelle say that she doesn't have jurisdiction and therefore she cannot make any representation.
Then how would we?
Correct. The city does not
That's
have
my point.
jurisdiction
We can't make
on
up our own
asbestos
rules.
nor lead paint. That falls from the EPA, that falls through the state, and and DENREC has the jurisdiction over those two items. The state has no jurisdiction on enforcement or verifying that. We do ask if there's an asbestos report, so if we're driving by and we get a complaint, we can verify that yes, there's asbestos. They are taking the proper measures to abate that. Typically, lead-based paint is interior, so they're doing the proper things to abate that. But again, that's going through DENREC. If there are concerns about that, typically people call DENREC. In the rare instances, the city will call DENREC to have them come down and stop people if there's issues with asbestos, and that has happened.
So, Terry,
Because we
to-
cannot stop somebody if there's an asbestos issue.
To your point, would it be better than to have this a condition of approval versus just something we look into, which it sounds like is already covered by our process?
I have no problem making it a condition of approval that the bidding be tested for the presence of lead paint. I think asbestos is under control, from what I understand, so it's already taken care of, let's say. So if you prefer that it be a recommendation of
I'm probably
approval,
gonna vote nay, but,
that's,
but it sounded better to be a condition. than
that's
just-
fine.
Don't the state records talk about, not just asbestos, but other hazardous materials? Is that a broader classification as opposed to directly saying lead paint? I'm sure this says, it talks about hazardous materials, and under that classification, you would think that would be lead paint as well, right?
So they talk about lead-based paint hazards. They talk about asbestos. They talk about, there's lead information for contractors. We're trying to do some research right now.
Yeah, I'm over
But
here doing the same.
it's all coming up going through DENREC for their jurisdiction and what is in state code about what they have.
It's
the
also coming
enforcement-
up through health and welfare.
Yes, because some of the houses, the older houses, so when you don't want, to scrape the paint, you want to deal with it in the proper manner for remediation.
So let me say what
We
was
have,
said.
Terry,
What-
just to, it says here that we are actually the first state in the EPA's Mid-Atlantic region to administer and enforce a lead renovation, repair, and painting program. So it does look like we have something in place at
Yeah,
the state
Through the
level.
state. So
That-
right now,
That might be a
there's a,
little bit
there's
general.
a, there's a, you're in the middle of a vote.
On Senate, yeah.
So I think you want to finish this vote. Because you are in the middle of a vote.
Specifically on DENREC, since you mentioned DENREC, in the Penoni report regarding DENREC, it said that Penoni had submitted an online request for information regarding the environmental concern at the subject property on December 21st, 2020. And that at the time of this report, and that means at the time the documentation was submitted to the record and to the Planning Commission, no response has been received. As such, it is unknown whether or not records exist for the subject property. Information received which changes the findings of this report will be forwarded upon receipt. So then I have another question. Then did the developer receive the response from DENREC regarding the agency's potential environmental concern at the property? Okay. Did DENREC ever respond to that request for information? And incidentally, the Penonis asked for a similar information from Sussex County. Again, we don't know if Sussex County has ever responded, although I doubt that they have because it's really not within their jurisdictions here. So, we rely on DENREC supposedly, but then DENREC doesn't respond to say if they have any concern or if they've done any type of testing. I mean, our job here is we are the first line of defense to make sure that the citizens of the city and the environment of the city are not covered with pollutants, okay? And I would find it very disappointing if we cannot find a way to insert a recommendation or a condition to the city council as part of our process.
Do
And
you
I think-
recommend that we make it a condition or a recommendation?
You could do either way. Depends if you want to do it broad to every application that comes through or specific to this public.
No, I want to make it specific to this property because to my knowledge, and with the exception of the ice plant, which we may then have to go through the same process, but to my knowledge, this is at this point the only industrial facility that we have within city limits. So
We have more. We have several.
okay, well then that is,
I'm just concerned, I want to just triple check with Alex that we are not putting ourselves into a potentially litigious situation by adding a condition at all at this point?
No, you can add a condition at this point. Actually, there's one additional condition I was thinking of proposing for your suggestion. Suggesting for your proposal would be the entrance permit, conditioning approval of the plan based on them getting an entrance permit, because technically the code requires them to have an entrance permit. As Janelle said, that's impossible for them to do, but eventually they would be able to submit that to the city. So that could be
So I would definitely put that in. So maybe we could, how do we want to proceed on voting on this? Do we want to
Okay,
continue
so-
the vote?
So before we get there, I had another item, which is my last question,
We
don't
just need
worry.
to keep going.
Relating
Is
to
it
the
related
material,
to your motion?
which is related to the way we are going to
Yeah, you
address
made the
these
motion.
issues.
Because you
and
made a
we'll see.
motion and you have a second, and if you're done discussing that motion, you need to call for the vote and vote on that motion.
Yes.
Or
That's fine.
withdraw
We-
it.
Yeah,
And just to be
Is
clear,
it-
this is a recommendation of the
correct.
city council, when they take this matter up, explore this issue.
That was my motion initially, but Alex suggested that we make it a condition, and I have no problem making it a condition. So let's do this for a second. I'm going to withdraw my motion, and I'm going to resubmit after I get advice from council here. And there was one last element which I wanted to address, is that the Pennoni letter indicated that there were 3 refrigeration units in the southern portion of the property building. I was wondering, and that maybe is a question for the city manager, the city engineer here, to your knowledge, have these units already been removed from the property? And if they have not been removed from the property, what precautions will be taken to ensure that the CFCs or other chemicals that may be contained in the refrigeration units do not leak into the city's environment during removal? And I have the same questions which applies to the PCBs, transformers, capacitors, elevators, and other potentially contaminated equipment which are mentioned in the Pennoni letters. So these pieces of equipment were identified to us by the developer, but there was never any follow-up as to what would happen. And all these...
All of that equipment needs to be removed per the DENREC regulations.
So we're in the same configuration
Yeah,
as
there
that
there
of
are
lead paint.
regulations on
Okay.
how to
So
dispose
I'm going
of
to
all of that
add
equipment.
I'm going to add PCPs and other potential contaminants contained in industrial equipment to my motion there, so that the relationship, the contacts between the city and DENREC to sort out how this is going to be taken care of, be addressed one way or another. Now, I have no preference as to whether it should be a recommendation or a condition. I understand that it might be more efficient to have it in the form of a condition, in which case I'm happy to resubmit my motion as a condition for approval, and with inclusion of PCBs and other contaminants usually found into industrial equipment.
So I know you withdrew your motion. Did your second agree with the withdrawal of the motion?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're back to
Okay.
square one.
So, Madam Chair, how would you like to move forward with a recommendation regarding the final subdivision plan to mayor and council?
Well, if there's a recommendation to be made, I would ask that a statement be made.
Okay, and can I make this in the form of a condition? I understand that it's possible. Do you have a preference as the chair?
I have no preference.
Can I just say, I would like to ask our city attorney about that, because my concern is that if it is in the form of a condition, that it may be setting a precedent going forward. A recommendation to the city council feels to me like it's a little more not setting a precedent, and that it is specific to this case, which personally I'm more comfortable with.
Exactly. So there's a few different ways you could handle this situation. If you want to vote on each condition individually and explore them and vote differently on different items, what you could do is vote on the underlying approval first, and then attempt to amend the underlying approval with additional conditions. And some of the conditions might stick and some of them might not stick. That might be a way that you can vote differently on each different item. So if someone would want to make a motion on the overall plan, and then you could explore different conditions.
So just for everybody's clarification, the recommendation kind of should be, and Alex can tell me, is you're recommending to mayor and council the final approval per the preliminary consent that included your 3 findings and 10 conditions, plus whatever additional recommendation and or condition you want to add to the application. Because your preliminary consent had 3 findings, and then the planning commission placed 10 conditions on the application, one of which had a clarification. So it was the 10 conditions with that clarification, and then any other items you would so choose to, and then the waiver for the elimination of the requirement of the entrance permit from DelDOT.
And I wanted to throw an idea out there. Perhaps a condition that would be safer, and I'm looking here for this, is that we just put a condition that the city of Lewes will provide supervision to make sure that state regulations are followed for removal of any hazardous materials, because it does look like there are requirements for concerning particulate emissions from construction. So during the demolition process, it looks like you must, in the state of Delaware, contact 10 days in advance, and I assume that's so the DENREC can supervise. But within our jurisdiction, could we request that? Would that be not a burden? I don't want to create anything that could be potentially burdensome here. That's my concern.
You could do that. You could also direct staff to invite DENREC or the Department of Health and Human Services to the public hearing. Perhaps they would want to give testimony, perhaps they wouldn't.
And perhaps they wouldn't come, because we've tried that before.
Yeah.
Yeah, they tend to be ghosts.
So I think, Madam Chair, I think what you're looking for, because you're looking for a recommendation to mayor and council, if it's in a recommendation of approval of the final subdivisions with the 3 findings and the 10 conditions per the preliminary consent, with whatever condition of approval, that should be the motion. Or if you have another motion that you would like to, somebody would like to make.
So we evacuate first the existing body of recommendation and so forth. That's your recommendation, and then we'll tackle the additional one that I would like to add, correct? That's what you're suggesting there.
I'm suggesting some type of motion needs to be made so you can have a discussion on an application, on an emotion.
And if I understand the city attorney, he's saying that what we should do, or at least one course, would be to approve the conditions as they now exist, and then add any other either recommendations or conditions to that. And
Yeah,
I think going with the city attorney's advice here.
But
might
it's
be-
not a condition of the application, it's a condition of approval.
Final approval.
Because it's not a condition of the application, because what you're proposing has nothing to do with the application, it's a condition of an approval.
Yes.
So
No.
just, that's why I was trying to make
So
it,
let,
First, we're accepting the application.
first it would be,
Findings and the 10 conditions.
yes,
Moving on
to a condition or recommendation of approval, an additional condition of approval or recommendation of approval.
so, Madam Chair, I have no problem with this procedure. We can proceed and take care of the first part, and that will be easier, I think.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Yes, I move that we approve the 10 conditions and the 3 findings and whatever else was.
So the specific code citation would be to review the application at an open meeting to confirm the complete application and related plans comply with the requirements of this chapter. So you're
That's
recommending that?
exactly what I meant.
I would second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
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 Okay. Any opposed? Okay, it's
No.
unanimous.
Okay, good. So now we
Any
can,
abstentions? Do we need to do that?
You can
Yep.
record me as not voting.
recused, yes, okay. All right, so now we can go back so I understand some of the members prefer a recommendation to the city council. So we go back to, the motion that I moved previously, and simply extending it to include PCBs and other harmful contaminants usually found in industrial equipment that is determined to be present at the site. And I guess the rest remains the same. It's a recommendation that the city council instruct the city administration, the city planner, the city engineer to coordinate with the state agencies having jurisdiction to make sure that the site is properly tested for the presence of these contaminants, and that remediation measures are taken, if necessary, during the decommissioning phase.
I would add per the Delaware State Code, right, or Delaware.
Yes, my only reluctance here is I don't know the Delaware State Code, and I'm afraid that if there's something which says that it can only be done, or it should only be done for building built after 2000 or whatever, it's going to fall out of scope. So I would like to make it applicable, even if there's nothing in the Delaware State Code that says that applicants are not allowed to spread lead paints all over the place if they have an industrial facility. I know that for housing facilities, houses, that's already covered. I mean, when you sell
There
a
are
house-
definitely.
But for industrial
he
houses,
made a
I
motion.
don't
We
know.
need a second before you can get into a discussion. That's all I need. So if somebody wants to second that motion, then you can get into discussion, please. Thank you.
Is there a second?
I second the recommendation.
Thank you. Discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to see it, I agree with this in general, I want to make it, my sense is to make it workable. I think there are frequent cases, there's got to be cases of demolition of buildings that have significant abatement criteria that they have to meet that's set by the state or the appropriate government. And I think the onus is on the contractor to secure that work is done and that the evidence of that work is available as it's underway and is done properly with the authority of the law or whatever else applies. I don't know how to apply something that doesn't exist yet, but I think we should apply everything that does exist to see that the abatement as part of this demolition for any hazardous material, including the ones that we don't want to put, we don't list because we don't know.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't ever put a list down that said, this is it, and other, you have to have more to it. But this is not the first
That's-
place that a building has been demolished. And I think there's abatement standards that have to be met, and we should make sure that it's a contractor that's gonna demonstrate to our satisfaction and not after the fact that it's met. That's not for, I'd like to see it simplified and not do somebody else's work.
I know we already have an amendment forward. I agree with Bill that in spirit, I totally agree with you, Terry. I am concerned that we have gone too deep down the hole with this, and that I would be far more comfortable with a condition even that just required the city, sorry Janelle, but the city building office to make sure that they are additionally supervising because of the site, of the nature of this site, that it's a commercial site in proximity to very precious natural resources and to residential neighborhoods. So to simplify, I would prefer to see this, that we just put it maybe as a condition that the city of Lewes will supervise any needed remediation or abatement per the Delaware State Code of hazardous materials per the Delaware State Code.
Yeah, I support
I would
that,
have
but-
to say, I don't think the city is qualified to supervise that.
Right. That's
You
what-
need training, you need testing, you need
I
all
guess what
kinds
I
of
mean
things.
by supervise is to make sure that the agencies that are supposed to be there supervising do their jobs.
I don't want to supervise a state agency.
Alex, are we treading on thin ice here as a commission on this topic?
So with the approval, there is a report of the recommendation that goes to council. Perhaps that report could include an emphasis on council exploring these issues. That's one way to approach it in a softer manner.
Yeah. I think this has merit on being pursued as a whole, but not putting all the weight on this one application seems unfair. Okay?
What do you mean? This is the first one we have,
It's
which,
not the, you know, I
which
had an
deals with it.
industrial building torn down next to me. I'm sure they didn't do anything about it. Now you're gonna have to talk about reporting, notifying all the residents. If you really went through this, it's it could be a complex process. I'd wanna know.
But what is the alternative?
Well,
Then
I'm not saying it's not needed, but we're putting the onus on this one application.
Well, because that's the one we had before us. Believe
Exactly.
me, if I
But,
could go
I
back
just-
to
I
the
just feel this
applications
is
that
out
have
of our-
already been dealt with.
This is
I
out of
would-
our purview. We have not been asked to. This is not a part of complying with the application.
No, we're not part, we've already
But that's
applied
what
the
we're here to vote
application.
on, whether
We've
they've
already
met the
applied the
burden.
application, so the
No,
application
they're
is
sitting
taken
here
care
looking
of.
for approval for the application, that they met the burden of our application process. And this is not part of it, unless I'm wrong.
No, we've already approved the application process, right? We voted a minute ago on that, so that's done, that's taken care of. We're now on to another subject,
Okay,
which
but
is
again,
that
I
of
don't think that it's the
protecting
burden
the
of this.
citizens of the city,
Yeah.
making a recommendation to the city council to ensure that the citizens of the city and the environment of the city are protected against the risk of contamination by lead paint and other contaminants, when we have in the report that has been submitted by this applicant an indication that the building has not been tested for lead paint, and there is absolutely no indication that the building will be tested by lead paint,
The
for lead
build-
paint.
Once they get the building permit, if I understood it right, they need to.
No.
correct?
Janelle has been very clear on that. Janelle and her team will take care of asbestos, which is why I've not
No,
mentioned the word
wasn't it
asbestos for the
hazardous
past
materials?
20 minutes, but they will not do anything related to that lead paint, because lead paint is under the jurisdiction of DENREC. And I want to bring supervision of the contaminants
isn't
such as
asbestos
lead
under the
paints
purview
and
of DENREC as
PCBs
well?
within
Correct.
the
Yeah.
jurisdiction
All
of the city.
contamination, all contaminants in everything Commissioner Priori has mentioned falls under the jurisdiction of DENREC. So if there's any issues, the contractors will have to work with DENREC
Correct.
to comply with abatement and remediation.
So to me, the recommendation should be a general recommendation on moving forward, but not burden this application with that. That's
Well,
what I feel.
if this is how you feel, you can simply vote against the recommendation. Personally, I feel that it is a dereliction of duty on our part if the commission does not give a recommendation to the city council that measures are taken to ensure that the city is not contaminated by lead paint, PCBs, and other contaminants. Because we are dealing with an agency, DENREC, of which we don't know whether or not they are going to do anything about it. And so we rely on state intervention when there is no indication that there will be state intervention, and when we have positive evidence in the documentation submitted by the applicants that they have not tested for lead paint and that they have no intention of testing for lead paint. As for your contractor on which you count to take measure, he will simply come with a bulldozer, he will bulldoze the whole thing down, and that will be the end of it.
Okay, Thierry, I think we really have to
So-
focus back down on what is doable on the part of the city.
Right.
And, you know, you're saying the state, we can't trust the state to do their jobs, but the city isn't qualified to do this. So we have to depend upon the state to do this. So I don't think we can put the burden on the city in this particular case, or in any case.
As I understand it, we'll be asking the city council, recommending that the city council look into this and take all means within their ability to assure that this is addressed. And we're not putting specific recommendations on them or a condition on them to do that.
That is correct,
I'm
yes.
comfortable with that recommendation to the city council, but no further.
And while this is an open discussion, I would just like to add one more thing. We had another kind of conundrum, catch-22 situation with this property earlier in the process, that the open space requirement of the development was put in the zoned open space area. Unfortunately, while we all knew that was not okay, it was not in our code at that time. Therefore, we had to say, this is going to happen, and we accept that, we approve it. However, after we went and we changed that, so now you cannot put open space, your required open space, into something that is zoned open space. I feel this is very much the same thing. So I feel that this is something with a great deal of merit that should be brought up, perhaps through the Environmental Subcommittee, or perhaps you as a private citizen. But I don't know that this is the time to do it. That I think all we can do is perhaps add a condition or requirement that just says Delaware State Code will be followed, and in the removal of any hazardous materials that are found on the site. We need to simplify it, is my opinion.
So would you like to submit a motion?
You have to withdraw.
I will withdraw mine if you resubmit one.
Well, you have to withdraw first, I think, and then I can make a shot
The
at
motion
it.
has to be withdrawn, and the seconder has to accept the withdrawal of the motion. And then a new motion may be made.
Okay, so I withdraw my motion.
Rich?
Or you can call for a vote.
I agree to withdraw.
Let me make a crack at it. I would like to make a motion to accept the final approval with the or to make a recommendation for the mayor and city council.
Already did that.
Okay.
You're good.
With the additional condition that mayor and city council will require the developer to follow all state laws regarding abatement of any hazardous materials.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Are we ready for a vote?
Yes, I think we need closure.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I vote.
Aye.
Should we vote? Okay, aye. So we're all.
Okay,
You're allowed
any
to vote
opposed?
because this is a new item. This is
Any
not part of the
opposed?
application.
Okay, it's unanimous.
With one abstention.
I just want to say for the record that I think that they're already required to do that.
Yes, so do I.
So we're kind of being.
But that's okay. We just
Okay.
Do we want to,
It's
So-
we'll call it
do we
ringing
want
a
to
bell.
think about another condition on the entrance? On the entrance, that
Yes,
Alex.
you need a motion, to just accept the fact that they can't get an entrance permit.
Or it's approval based on a permit.
Yeah.
Require them to submit the permit when they obtain it.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll make,
just for information, they do have their plan approval for the entrance
right,
permit, and they do have their letter of no contention to recordation from DelDOT. They just can't physically get the permit until they have a contractor.
okay.
And the site plan is approved by the city and recorded in the county.
So how is the motion worded?
So it would be a motion to accept the plan without to recommend approval of the final plan without the requirement of the entrance permit, as they cannot receive an entrance permit from DelDOT without the approved plan.
Okay,
And if you just want to say what Janelle just said?
yeah, I'd like to make a motion based on what Janelle just said.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Not
Okay,
voting.
again, it's unanimous.
No, yeah, I would call it not voting rather than abstaining.
Okay, so I think we're done then with Roosevelt Landing.
Yes.
And let's move on to the proposed home occupation ordinance. Want to talk about the update?
Sure,
Well-
let me, so since we last talked, it was suggested we go back to city council for their workshop and talk it over with city council and present it and see what their concerns were, so we can sort of wrap everything together before we send it back to them for a final version. And there was a couple of things that are brought up at city council. For the most part, by the way, they liked what we did, what we put together, the process, the formats. They were pretty, and the comments were very positive for the most part. There were some good suggestions made, good conversation going on. So the top of the line, many of them reflect the question of the number of employees in the various tiers we allow. Terry has suggested that those numbers are too large, that the number of 4 employees, the way it's worded right now in tier 3 is that no more than 4 non-resident employees. He believes that's too large. He wants to limit it to perhaps 2. There was also suggestions made by Amy to clarify what we mean by full-time employees, FTEs, FTE equivalents versus full-time bodies. Okay, and that could be language we wrap in, make them FTE equivalents rather than full-time bodies. There's also, Amy suggested that we sort of look at folding in some definitions, folding in seasonal-based businesses, so that there's a recognition that some businesses go up during seasons, high seasons, during summer season, and so we could recognize that in some of the language around the employees. So bottom line there is, I think I'd like to go back and tweak the language around the employees, okay, to come up with a better, clearer definition of what we mean, reflecting some of Terry's concerns, and as well as some of Amy's concerns, sort of wrapping that together. Now, we haven't had an opportunity to do that, so we could do that for the next meeting, if you're okay, if you're so inclined. So that was one around employees. There was also questions regarding there are suggestions that we provide a list of those businesses, home-based businesses that sign up for the city, so we give locations of where they're located. Because, as Tim suggested, that it's important that people moving into these communities have a place to go where they can find out whether their neighbors are involved in some type of high-impact business. So, and it makes sense because they're registering with the city. So it makes sense that we make sure that we have that available on our website at some point, where these home-based businesses are, so that people moving in can access that. There was also a question whether or not the square footage that's listed here, the restriction is 100, let me go back to it, no more than 10% or 300 square feet. Any of those floor dwelling accessories shall be used for the home occupation. And Tim was concerned whether or not if you have 4 employees, whether that's cramming them into that space. But it's 300. the way it's listed is 10% or 300 square feet, whichever is greater. And so in those situations, and if you realize, and the other thing is that these homes are in less dense communities, and so these homes are just, in general, they're going to be larger than that age. So a 10% on a larger home is, so of 4,000 square feet, that's 400 feet. So these are larger homes, presumably, that are going to be allowed to expand. And because of whichever is greater, I think that gives you flexibility to accommodate those number of employees. Particularly because the number of employees is sort of used as a target number of employees. It's not going to be, because there's employees coming in and out of these businesses typically, they're not going to be typically sitting around, you know, crammed together in any kind of space like that. If you have any comments about that, Tim?
I will offer one comment. I think it's very hard when you're creating language for code, making recommendations, to actually be able to consider all possible applications of what you're creating. It's true that some businesses might have a person who works at the base, if you will, at the home, in the home spot, and other employees be working away from the home. But I would caution you to make a statement that you won't have 100% of all the employees working in the home, in that home office. It's really difficult, though, to do what you're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah.
I recognize that, but I also know that if the code is not too prescriptive, then in fact it becomes, it's a 9-lane highway through which applicants will drive their 18-wheel trucks through.
Yeah, and we're trying to find a balance here, because you don't want to be too restrictive, because the whole process here, the whole AGA process is, they don't want to be too restrictive. So yeah, we try to find some balance in that.
Right.
I think some of that will resolve, Tim, once we come up with the language around employees.
Yes,
Okay,
I
once
think you're correct.
Once we come up with the
about
language around employees, then we can see how it fits into that square footage and those issues that you raised regarding
Right.
that.
that.
Okay.
The other thing that's difficult is that when you are in this kind of thing about code and code language is, and Janelle will speak to this, I'm sure she's advised you before about this, is that typically the code is written to apply uniformly across all parts of the city. And we're not a monolith here. We have many different types of housing, and you need to proceed with caution accordingly. Thank you.
I share that concern too. I like Terry, I'm concerned about the I think we get into the gray area here when we hit C with the potential impact home occupations. So I understand where Councilperson Marasco was coming from with a body versus a full-time employee who isn't there, and she's probably thinking of working virtually. However, that could also be that I'm running a construction company out of my home, and that everybody meets up here at 7 a.m. in the morning and picks up materials and loads their trucks, but they don't actually physically work here during the day, they're on site. So I think that's like a slippery slope to go down. I would personally, I hold the continuing concern that 4 non-resident employees is a lot for a home business anywhere in the city of Lewes.
Yeah, I think I've come around to that line of thinking, quite frankly, Deb, and I've talked to my subcommittee members about this, but I think that a way around that is to say 2 non-residents or for a maximum of 4. So along the lines of assuming that there are 2 resident employees, 2 residents, and you have 2 non-residents, the total is 4, but it's not 6, right? It doesn't mean 6, right? And so we could work around it that way if you guys don't know if you thought about that. But that's the kind of language I'm thinking about adding back into it, like the maximum of 4 as opposed to, you know what I'm saying? And then the FTE thing is really to accommodate part-time workers. It's an hour, so the hourly stuff, because, you know, businesses go by FTE, but there could be multiple people involved in one FTE simply because one FTE equivalent, it's a full-time equivalent, right? So it's full-time equivalent. So it's 40 hours to give you equivalency.
Yeah.
And so by saying the FTE equivalent, you represent the idea that, okay, there can be multiple people in there, you can't have more than the equivalent of 4, okay?
I just think in that scenario, it actually could represent more disturbance to the neighborhood, because if you have multiple people who are working part-time, that means more people again coming and going. I think that we're
Well-
going into a gray area on these, on the you know, potential impact, and that kind of, it's gone beyond what started this whole process, which is a pretty simple home business. So I just.
Well, it's only recognizing really what's out there, though. We're not.
Right.
And our instruction from council was not to restrict it to this one application.
Right,
We were
of
supposed to
course.
look at it broadly across the city, and so.
Which you guys
we
have
had to
done a
look
great
for
job with.
Other way accommodations, and so,
Also looked at other models.
right.
We got, you know, information from not just locally, but around the state or around the country on what, so.
I just, you know, last thought is too that, it's hard to find a comparison to Lewes, because number one, the tremendous, percentage of retired people, we are more quiet than most communities in the residential. I don't know that there are other towns and cities that even compare, because I've looked for the data to find anyone who had as many senior citizens as we do. And I've not found it.
Yeah, you know, I agree, we are very unique that way, but the other flip side of this is, you know, right now, home-based businesses isn't a problem in Lewes from the
Right.
standpoint of nuisance. It's not a nuisance, we don't get reports of nuisances or businesses that are nuisances, right? Or complaints from neighbors. And so from that standpoint, Lewes is functioning well when it comes to home-based business. So this is just sort of recognizing the reality out there and trying to put a framework around it, okay? It's not. And so I don't anticipate that when we pass this ordinance, all of a sudden we got all these construction businesses moving into these neighborhoods. That's not it. It's just sort of a recognition of what's out there now and sort of putting a framework around it, you know?
I unfortunately am always that what if person. It's like born with that. And my other what if is so what if we pass this and that it never occurred to someone who lives here within the city limits that they could be running their construction business out of their home. So they ditch the commercial property that they have outside the city limits and.
So in that case, they kick off the administrative process, the neighbors complain, it goes to city council, we decide whether or not it's appropriate for the neighborhood. I mean, that's why that administrative
Right.
process is there. So if you're a low impact, you don't go that way, okay? But if you're a high impact, it's going to council, and council's going to make a recommendation whether or not this is appropriate for this particular neighborhood.
So perhaps one thing that would be very simple is instead of calling it potential impact, you know, let's call it high impact. Because we have no impact, low impact.
Impact, we can say impact, that's fine. Yeah. That's fine.
Because I think it's not a potential. I think if a business falls under that category, it is likely going to be disruptive to someone in that neighborhood, considering our average age in the city of Lewes.
And again, we recognize that because that's why the administrative process is in there. We said, you know, we had to have some neighborhood impact there.
Okay. Barbara, did you want to add something?
No, sorry, I was just coughing. Oh.
I'd like to ask a question. Kevin,
Yes.
when you said you were going to list them on the city website, would you also list them at the Chamber of Commerce?
It's a public document, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's,
That's not up to us, that'd be up to
Okay.
the Chamber of Commerce.
But we would make them aware of it, or could you not do that?
That's up to the Chamber of Commerce,
Okay.
because you have to pay to be a member of the chamber.
Yeah, my guess on this would be they would list them if they were a member, and only if they were a member.
True.
We had the
Point.
chamber at the first meeting of the committee, and they were interested in the process and were open to exactly what you said, listing those.
Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a little more work.
Yeah, there's a little more work. Other than that, though, the changes that were suggested at the last meeting, Janelle has incorporated into the updated version here. So all those things like funeral homes are added back in, by the way. So we got, make sure we're excluding those. And there are other items that were recommended into the last committee meeting that have all been added into that. So if we want to review it to make sure they're all there, whatever comments you have. So if you guys are all right with it, I'll go back.
Can I raise some questions?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I sat through, you guys have done yeoman's work, which I really appreciate. I did sit through the discussion at the previous meeting. I watched the council meeting, so I'm familiar with all the discussion that took place there. I didn't have an opportunity to participate in the discussion directly, but I wonder if I could just throw some questions out about some of the terminology. And raise one specific question. Unfortunately, it has to do with animals, but not specifically the issue that gave rise to this whole discussion in the first place. There are some terms here, and I guess this goes back in part to Tim's issue before about how prescriptive you can and can't be in writing code and the delicate balance you have to strike. But there are some terms here that give rise to a lot of subjectivity. For instance, excuse me, in the paragraph titled Regulations Applying to All Home Occupations, no exterior adverse effects to exterior properties such as noise, excess traffic, dust, smoke, gas, or fumes. The word adverse effects is a very, very subjective term, especially as it relates to noise. If I have a neighbor who has a high school kid who gets together with his friends and wants to set up a garage band and practice every afternoon, can't do anything about that, really.
Yeah, you know what, I agree with some of this language issues. Some of this language is taken from the code as it exists now.
Right,
Okay?
understood.
And so this particular graph that you're talking about is in our code as it stands, as that language, okay? And so, but it goes to Janelle's point that we need to go back and look at those codes and update the language and definitions on them. But this is really extracted directly from the existing code.
But if we're going to get to the point of essentially regulating who can and can't have a home occupation, I'm a little concerned about who's going to make that. This is not part of the administrative process. This gets to, are you a no, quote unquote, no impact or low impact home occupation? Who's going to decide if a neighbor doesn't like the business that, oh, they're making too much noise or they're creating too much traffic?
Well,
the same goes for the language about shall not generate parking demands that are inconsistent with the character of the neighborhood.
Again, that's part of the existing code. So the application comes into the planning department, and the planning department makes a determination which tier they would fit into based on their outline of the business, okay? And so, but if there are any objections that are raised by the neighbor, then they go into the administrative process, okay? So there is a subjective determination made, to your point, of where these businesses will slot in, okay? And whether or not that particular business is okay for that particular zone in the city, based on its tier position. And then after that determination made, then it goes into the process.
But essentially, no offense to Janelle, but you're putting on her or the planning, whoever's sitting in the chair at the planning department, either the responsibility or discretion to subjectively decide whether or not that business, as it's described in the application, is creating parking demands that are inconsistent with the character of the neighborhood. My concern, I'd be interested in council's view of this, but to me it suggests kind of the opportunity of somebody to challenge the ordinance on the grounds that it's, opens the door to some very arbitrary decision making. And I think either you have off-street parking or you don't have off-street parking. You need one space or you need more than one space. But having a totally subjective standard like that, to
You know,
me, leaves open
again, I
the
go back
door.
to that whole thing on parking is taken from existing language in the code. That is
But
a-
we're, I
that's-
understand, but we're rewriting it now for purposes of regulating home occupations. We're not tied to having to use existing
Yeah.
code language.
Okay. I mean, I understand your position there, but, you know, we were trying to figure out a way, quite frankly, to allow for parking, on-street parking, okay, in some situations, but to what degree we allow on-street parking. And so we had to define it based on the character of the neighborhood, because each neighborhood is different. For instance, if you want to park, you know, along Savannah, it's different than parking in the back streets of Lewes. And so you have to incorporate some level of neighborhood consistency, right, or neighborhood application. And so this is the way we said, okay, we got to get it from a standpoint of what's consistent with the character of the neighborhood. In some cases, a tier 2 business would be appropriate to have 2 cars parked along the street. In some cases, it wouldn't, simply because the neighborhood can't accommodate it. You know, parking is restricted in certain neighborhoods in the city. So it's just a recognition that parking isn't universal around here. And so you've got to find a way to accommodate different neighborhoods for different situations.
Yeah.
And this is the easiest language we came up with. And it really is extracted directly from the existing code. So we thought, yeah, it may not be the best, but at least it's stood the test of time so far, okay? And it's allowed people to understand exactly, you know, it's been interpreted in such a way that it hasn't invited those kinds of conflicts.
I understand what you're saying. I would encourage you to, I would encourage us to try to seek out some other way to make it somewhat less subjective and somewhat more objective, if we can find that way.
You know, I hadn't really thought about it, to be honest with you, and as I do hear it, perhaps mandating parking requirements for this just is not something we need to do as a city. Maybe it's just left out. Parking is just completely omitted from this. It is tough because you get these very old codes here in the city of Lewes and elsewhere, and rewriting them, sometimes it's easier to just admit they don't work and kind of start over. So just a thought, because I certainly live in a neighborhood where there's off-street parking available in most properties, but sometimes we just have friends come and park in the street, and no one cares about that either. And I think, you know, Pilot Town on out, that's pretty much the case.
You know, we could leave out parking altogether, although I'm not sure. Rich, what are your thoughts on that, whether or not?
It's something to consider, that's
I
all.
think we need to address
I
parking.
think, yeah.
But I really, you know, we grappled with this.
Yeah, we did.
really did.
I'm
because
sure.
As Kevin said, it's different on Savannah than it is in, you know, deep in a development, you know, where, you know, it's just, so we're trying to accommodate and address both those situations. But I think that the administrative process allows for neighbors to come in and say, this is why it's different. This is why my street is different. So I know it's not ideal. I know it's not. But I think that at some point you just have to allow whoever is sitting in the city planner seat that they're gonna have some discretion and be able to apply this in a reasonable manner. And at some point, we just have to have trust that that is going to be able to occur to the satisfaction of the neighborhood.
But parking is not specific to the type of business. I tend to agree with what Deborah said, that it doesn't need to be there. Because if you're having childcare, you don't need parking, or family care. I mean, you need temporary parking for somebody to drop somebody off, but you don't really need parking for the owners. I know you looked at other townships, how did they handle parking?
They all include it.
They did?
Yeah.
Interesting.
They all what?
Linda,
They
what
all
about a
include it.
situation where you
Yeah.
have an accountant who has people coming over, during April, during tax season?
Right.
And they need to park there for an hour or two to go in and go
Can you-
through all their taxes. So there are so many different situations. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There are so many different situations that you're trying to accommodate here.
Yeah, but you understand what the concern and the risk is that if somebody has a home business in an area where parking is scarce, maybe downtown, and every day 2 employees come and basically park in front of other people's houses, and then the people who live there cannot have their family and friend find parking to visit them. That's basically what we are dealing with here.
Well, again, that's the reason for the administrative process stuff, Terry. I mean, that's the kind of things that are addressed when it's addressed when it goes first to the planner and the neighbors, and they try to work out those problems. And then if if it doesn't work there, it goes to the conditional.
But then,
And I think if I may, apologize, it's also why they looked at certain potential uses are not,
Yeah.
don't make sense in certain zoning districts.
Yes.
Because there's parking issues in certain zoning districts. They took that into consideration. So it's like, okay, maybe don't put a potential impact home-based business in an area where you may need parking when you know there's an impact that already where there's already a parking issue.
Yeah.
So they
So
took
anyway,
that into consideration.
So anyway, you're gonna submit a new version of this, and
I'm updating the employee.
Right.
Sorry?
I'm updating the employee definition, yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean specifically employees because I had raised these issues, but in general, that we will have another opportunity to look at the
And then I
the
believe
document, right?
Commissioner Roth had a
I've got
comment.
one other issue, but I think given what I've heard, I think you've got to rewrite the administrative process language, or at least the opening line, because the way I read this and what it says is that the administrative process is just for potential impact home occupation in Tier C.
Yes,
So the people who fit under B, low impact, never get to the administrative process,
that's right.
which gets back to the issue of the subjectivity of what's parking demands that are inconsistent with the character of the neighborhood, and either how does the applicant complain that the planner has been arbitrary, or how does the neighbor complain that the planner hasn't taken the problem into account?
We considered putting the administrative process in Tier B for a while. And the consensus was it wasn't necessary.
I think
you'll take a look at the parking comment
Yeah, we can take a look at the
more.
parking comment
Yeah.
more and figure it out.
Here's the other issue I wanted to raise about animals. I recognize that the definition of animal kennel has been amended, and that the language also largely comes from, or the remaining language largely comes from existing code. But as I looked at it, and I looked at prohibited home occupations, thinking about it from personal experience, the inclusion of the term boarded leaves me wondering, do any of us know people who take in one or more dogs to be boarded just overnight, or maybe 2 nights or 3 nights?
Yeah.
Is that a home occupation?
Yeah, pet sitters.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Pet sitters,
Do that all the time.
Yeah.
right.
They'll
Well,
either go to the house of their client or they'll bring them home.
yeah, the way this is written, that's a prohibited home occupation. And I'm not sure that we want to prohibit people from taking in 1 or 2 or 3 dogs.
We can write in language to make clear that we're not talking about those kind of temporary.
And I think there's an easy way to rewrite that.
Yeah, we can rework that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
by
problem.
just defining that in or out of the term
Yeah.
kennel
Yeah, we can definitely rework that. It's fine, it's okay.
I'm happy to help you.
We're not here to punish people taking stray dogs, you know, that's not our.
Right.
Yeah, you don't want to prohibit foster
Yeah, we don't
dogs,
wanna do
I don't
that.
think.
No.
So, okay, that's it for me.
I'm actually looking at this, and I have to admit that I have bred my dogs in the past and have a dog who's out showing. In May again, I was like, oh, wait, this I think is going to make me out of code, but I guess I will deal with that when the time comes.
Yes, you will.
All right, let's keep moving now, because
I'm
we're,
already across from Mr.
got another half hour.
Mr. Ritzert over there.
Okay, discussion and possible action, including possible scheduling of continuation of a public hearing regarding CU 125, an application for conditional use with site plan for the Donovan Smith Manufactured Home Community. The subject property is Sussex County tax map parcel, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so just a reminder that the discussion tonight is only on the scheduling. It is not on the substance or completion of the application and plans.
Yep, it's just pick a date. By the way, Alex has stepped out, so you do not have legal representation. So if you have a date in mind, we do need about 20 days in advance, so we can make sure all the legal notice is done in compliance, because the legal notice does need to be redone, and they need 15 days, and we need a couple of days ahead of that for prep, which means we're looking at mid to late April. I will let you know the first week in March, Max is not available.
March?
May.
Oh.
Sorry, I'm looking at my calendar and it's coming up March. So Max is not available the first week in May.
So we're really looking at either the second week of April or the fourth week of April, because the third week of April would be our
The first
normal
week of
meeting.
April is too soon, I think.
It's
from what
way
you
too
said.
soon.
So it has to be the fourth week
20
of April.
days. Can I ask a baseline question? Have we gotten the additional documentation?
You are discussing the public scheduling of the public hearing only tonight.
Can I ask a hypothetical question?
You are discussing the scheduling of a public hearing only tonight. You do
How
not
about a
have legal
procedural
representation.
question?
You are discussing
Okay.
the scheduling of a public hearing, the continuation of the public hearing only tonight. You do not have legal representation here tonight. That is what I need you to focus on tonight. I
Okay, so-
apologize,
May.
but that is what you can focus on, and
So
that
the-
is what the agenda is.
So the fourth week of April is possible? Or
So the 21st through the 25th? Is that what you're looking at?
when is our normal meeting?
Your normal meeting is going to be April 16th.
Okay. Okay,
So-
so the 21st or the 28th, if we want to make it on
On a Monday.
On a Monday.
The 21st does not work because PRC has a meeting that day.
Okay, the 28th? Well, how about another day that week?
The 22nd does not work, the 23rd does not work. Because there are meetings in this room those afternoons. The Thursday, the 24th works.
I can't make that.
Okay.
Can't either.
The 28th works, then the 29th works.
Twenty-eighth is better? Okay, is 28th okay with everyone?
What were the other options, 28th?
And 29th. It's a Monday or a Tuesday. Right now, there is nothing on the calendar for this room or in any other room.
I prefer the Monday personally, but I know that I'm free.
The 29th, which is a Tuesday, actually works better, but if need be, we can go with the.
And what time would you like?
I can't make anything earlier than,
6, right? Or 6:30?
6:30.
Okay, you need 6:30. So Tuesday, April 29th, 6:30.
Does that work for folks?
I think that also, just like Monday, Tuesday is not a busy restaurant night for maybe people who live there and would work in that field, and nighttime is better than day.
Okay.
Let me,
So
are you good?
April 29th, Tuesday at 6:30 here.
Yes.
6:30 that's right. Yep. What was that, Bill, please?
That I'm not available then, but there should be listening, it sounds like that's a reasonable number of people will be here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we don't have to take a vote on that, do we?
No.
Okay. All right, so that's our schedule. Please review everything that's been submitted, and hopefully we will get more material before that
Yes.
date.
Yep,
Okay.
say that, right?
Janelle, should we
See,
send
Melanie
you
snuck it in.
issues that we think are missing from the package?
That would be fine, yes.
Okay,
If there are questions you have, you can send them to me. That would be fine.
okay, so if there's anything in the package that you think is incomplete, please send Janelle a message.
Janelle, here.
Janelle, by when?
Monday, April 7th, by the close of business, so I have time to get everything ready to have it prepared for the public hearing.
Okay.
And now I need to make sure Max is good with that date.
Should we have an alternate date then?
That's probably a good idea.
Okay, bye, Alex.
I guess
He has to go.
the day before,
May I ask a question? This is none of my business, but let me just, is it possible to have the hearing scheduled on the same date as your next meeting? And just have the hearing held earlier? It's just an idea.
Well, that's too soon, isn't it?
Is that April 16th?
I need to do the math. I need to get a look at the calendar.
I also think it's a little tricky because we do have the time limit on our meetings
But-
now,
But
and this
not on a
could be a
public
long
hearing.
one.
It would be
Right.
two different
Right,
things.
and then,
It would be two different events.
Okay,
right,
I just think this potentially could be a longer one.
okay. It's just an idea. I was hoping.
Yeah, I know,
This
back
could
in
be a
the,
long- this
back
could
in
be
the
a
good
long
old
hearing,
days, we used to be able to
Okay.
do that.
You could, it could, we just have to do everything as soon as possible.
That seems like a long meeting.
Okay,
Okay,
I withdraw that suggestion.
okay. Do you guys want to,
Okay.
do
Janelle?
the 15th, the day before, as a backup date?
No,
No, I'm just asking,
yeah.
looking for a backup date.
Let's have a backup date in case Max isn't available.
Could we do the 28th, the day before, as a
Why don't
backup
we do
date?
that as a backup?
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so the 20, or the 28th, right? That's one. Or two. At the same time, is that correct?
6:30, yes.
Same time, okay.
Okay, so please hold both. Once Max gets back to me, I will let you know.
Okay.
Good.
Sorry, I was rude to Alex. I did not mean to be. He needs to make sure he's perfectly clear that he's not.
Yeah, because it's not gonna
Um,
be Alex again.
Okay, next item is discussion and possible action regarding a waiver for Carriage House at Cape Henlopen regarding the size of proposed piping. So this is a waiver request.
I'm gonna turn this one over to Andrew.
Yes, so the developer was asking for a waiver request from the code section that states that all stormwater piping needs to be 15 inches. This requirement is only in the subdivision code. And we had a meeting with the developer, with city staff and the BPW to review this waiver request prior. There was no issues with this waiver request. They're asking for a 10-inch pipe to be installed as the outfall pipe. The pipe is 10 feet long and goes from their outlet structure to a proposed swale that GMB's designed for the city on Alaska Avenue. Out of the outfall structure is a 6-inch reel and a 1 1/4-inch orifice. So we have reviewed the flows that would be coming out, and this pipe is sized appropriately for the flows that would be coming out of the pipe structure. So in meeting with the BPW and city staff, there was no issues found with the waiver request.
And there was a hardship that was,
There was a hardship with the cover
discussed.
requirements and trying to get the pipe covered because of the different grades and tying into the proposed swale.
okay.
I also just, engineering is not my thing, that's why we rely on you, but I would assume that a 10-inch pipe over a 15 would, if there was any outcome, it would be less water coming out. Would that
It would be less water coming out than what would be coming out of the 15, but the way it's controlled, it meets all the requirements.
Okay, and is there any concern of it backing up at the source?
No.
And it's only draining from this property.
It is only draining from this
Okay.
property.
And we're also, my only concern here actually, is I'm trying to figure out. No, I take that back. I was concerned about, because we have another larger property that's under construction at present. If runoff from that property could impact this property.
Not this property, no.
Okay.
Do you recall when your meeting was? What date your meeting was?
That was on February 24th.
I'm curious why the letter to Janelle, or the memo to Janelle from Pannoni, mentions the discussion with the city engineer and the Sussex Conservation District, saying they have no issues with the pipe size, but there's no reference to BPW.
I'm not sure, but I know the BPW was part of that meeting. Robin and Ben Hone were both there.
They didn't remit a separate correspondence? BPW?
No, it was just one meeting all together. The Conservation District that's referenced in here is Conservation District has already given their approval to the design, as it is.
Just as an aside, is this pipe sizing not appropriate for the subdivision regulations?
It probably is something that needs to be looked at, again, also with the cover requirements, with the materials that are required by the subdivision ordinance. Just for a little bit of clarification, there is a pipe size that the city is putting in that is 12 inches that is going under their entrance, but that is not part of the subdivision, that's part of the city work. So there was a little bit of a hardship there that they were gonna be required to put in a larger size than the city would.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion?
Did you want to hear from the applicant first?
Oh,
Yes.
certainly.
That's you, Rick. Oh, okay. You're welcome.
My name is Alan Dector, a professional engineer with Pannoni Associates, and Andrew, the city engineer, he said everything exactly how we discuss it. To answer the one question about BPW, how we discuss things, BPW is kind of part of GMB, like the comment letter and everything comes back as from GMB, BPW stuff is part of it. So there's no reason I didn't say BPW. I treat GMB and BPW as one entity. So that's the only reason. But yeah, I mean, it's only a 10-foot pipe. The only other thing I would add is there's no maintenance obligation to the city, right? It is a private pipe. It's only 10 feet. So if any issues happen to it, it would be on the private community, the HOA, after the developer turns it over. So, I mean, that's really the only other thing to add. It's a controlling pipe from the underground stormwater system, which is controlled by the 1.5-inch orifice. So it's basically trickling out. You know, there's very little flow in this pipe. So, I mean, a 10-inch is oversized to begin with, but, you know, that's the largest we could accommodate in this situation.
Where does this pipe exit the property on Alaska? I can't, by the drawing, I can't tell where
In the swale.
this is.
So if you're coming off of Cape Henlopen and you're going down
I know Alaska, but where, how
So-
far in does
So
it?
if you would turn, you know, the entrance into the property is probably
Yeah.
30 feet from Cape Henlopen.
Right.
It's just on the downstream end, so there's a pipe that GMB designed under our entrance as part of the city project. Our pipe and their pipe exits at the same location and then proceeds down the swale that they designed to the end of Alaska Avenue.
Okay, all right.
It is a tough diagram.
Yeah.
And just one final question. Is there any environmental downside to the smaller pipe? Is it,
No.
it sounds like it's already oversized or
Yeah,
adequately.
there's no,
Okay.
no concern on the size.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we need a motion to approve this?
Yes,
Okay, so I make the motion that we approve the pipe as proposed here.
well,
I
I think we'll
second.
actually be approving the waiver.
Right.
Approve the waiver.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a recommendation for approval.
I second approval of the waiver.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, code clarifications. Discussion, public comment, and possible recommendation regarding uses within the town center and town center historic zoning districts.
So, a while ago, and we were finally able to get this one on the agenda, council and the planning commission asked staff to take a look at a bunch of items for the code. And this one came up from both groups about looking at uses in the town center. And one of them was looking at professional offices within the town center. So taking a look, it wasn't as simple as just saying no professional offices, because the way the professional services definitions were created, I created a professional services definition that addressed lawyers, doctors, engineers, finance, real estate, health, and social service agencies. So allowing them in the town center and where other professional services are, but in the town center, they'd only be allowed above the first floor, so they'd have to be second floor or above. Now, again, if they're ones that already exist, they can remain there. But when they leave, another, lawyer's office cannot go back there. It'd have to be one of the other uses. And I also took the opportunity to expand the definition of a personal service to make it clear, like, hair salons, tailors, therapists, massage therapists, because that's really what that kind of includes what a personal service also includes, because it was kind of like a little vague. So I took a look at that, and then I updated the chart to where did I do that? Oh yeah, and I also changed restaurants at street level, above street level, in the town center or in the general commercial, that they can be above street level, so you can have a second floor restaurant. Because they can be on the first floor, but they can't be on the second floor. It's
No,
like, why can't you have both a first and a second floor restaurant?
We know the history of that, and I think it's a good change.
So I thought, well, we're in here, let's just take a look at that. If you don't like any of these changes, that's okay. And then I also took a look and again added the service establishments professional, made it permitted just like the other ones were, but with that caveat that number 13 that then says at the bottom with note 13, permitted in town center and town center historic at any floors above street level. So if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. If I need to go back to the drawing board, I'm happy to do that. I thought these were kind of clean and simple to address, I think, the concerns that the commission and council had mentioned about the town center.
I just have a question concerning massage therapists. My understanding of massage therapist was that it was a professional health service which is covered by Medicare. And I don't understand why it is here under C, professional services personal, rather than F, services professional. But maybe you mean something else by massage therapist, that's what I understand. That may be why it is, but there is, we have such a business in the, what is the name of that building where there's that blue hotel on the island? I mean, just across the bridge. What is it called?
So that's actually zoned differently.
Yes, but this is a massage therapist, and I've gone there on a couple of occasions when I've dislocated a muscle or something, and this is covered.
Yeah,
by
I think that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
actually a chiropractic office, I think.
Right.
Yeah, Lotus, yes, that's the name of
Yeah.
it. And now, this business would not qualify as a, would it be under professional services, like any health provider, or would it fall under massage therapist here under C?
I would need to know more about what they're doing.
They're doing, they're putting electric heating pads on your back, and then they push and they put your muscle back in place and your bones back in place.
Town
And
center historical.
Yeah, because if
yes, but
that's
I'm
marine
wondering if a
commercial, that's
business
different.
like this was going to come into the town center,
Okay, gotcha.
would it be considered as a massage therapist or as, well, I'm not sure.
So asking, would it be allowed to be on a first floor, or would it not be allowed to be on a first floor?
Yeah.
Can I follow up?
I'm
It would
I'm
be.
just wondering
It
what,
would be allowed on the first
I'm
floor
just
because it's a
wondering-
permitted use already.
yeah.
I was just expanding the definition of a personal service, which is already a permitted use in the town center. And there's no limitation on it being a first floor or second floor. The only limitation on anything being on above the first floor is that professional. So a personal service can be on a first floor, so that massage therapist can be on a first floor
They could, yeah.
in
I have
any
no-
of the
I-
zoning
I
districts
have
that
no
it's allowed
concern as to
in.
where they will be, whether it be the first or the second floor. I'm just wondering what led you to put them into personal services rather than professional services. But it really doesn't matter that much. They are where they are, and they'll go wherever they go. They're allowed to go if they need to move. And that's
I actually think Theory has a point, and I'm not meaning to be a smart aleck here. I actually have a question. Where would you put acupuncturists in this category?
I'd put it in a personal service. You're providing a service, or maybe to the care of a person.
Okay.
So you're providing to me, and based on my history and my experience in the codes I've dealt with elsewhere, that's where they fall into.
The reason I raise it is because massage therapists, acupuncturists, and several other, I'll call them professions, are regulated by the state as health professions.
Right.
Then it's a doctor.
And again, I'm not saying it matters to me whether they're on the first or the second floor, but my husband, for example, is a licensed massage therapist, not in Delaware, so he can't practice here. But when we lived in DC, he was chairman of the Board of Massage Therapy, which fell under the health department. In Massachusetts, he's licensed by the health department. So you have all these allied health professions, and there's a long list of them. And some people might think of them as personal services, but they're considered by the health department as health services.
Well-
And we've got health in the definition of professional services, it says health. And then, like I said, I'm not being a smart aleck, I'm just saying,
No,
there are
but it's-
definitional issues here.
But the establishments primarily engage in providing services involving the care of a person or their personal goods or apparel. So again, you're providing a good to a person. You're getting your hair cut. You could getting your makeup done, you know, a beauty salon, a spa, a massage therapist, you know, an acupuncturist, you know, those
I
are
think-
providing services to, and yes, they do have to go through board of regulations through the health department, but they're falling into, I'm providing a personal service.
Yeah, I think the massage therapists that you're referring to are those that are typically found in salons or maybe in hotels, sometimes in luxury hotels, where you can get a massage by somebody who is not actually a licensed health professional, but is simply somebody who provides massages. It's
Just for clarification, that office is next to mine, and it's not a massage therapist, it's a chiropractor's
a
office.
chiropractor, yeah.
Yeah, they don't do massage
No,
therapy.
but as
They do
Alan said,
therapy
they
there,
are
but
massage therapists.
They don't do
who are-
massage in a typical way. It's
Right.
part of their chiropractic.
Right,
Yeah.
so chiropractic is a doctor's
hurts when they're
office
done, let's
because
put it
you
that
have a medical license. But again, most massage therapists that I've ever been to or I know of have a license and are licensed, and
That's right.
if you work in the state of Delaware, you better be having your license through the state, because you are required to be licensed through the state of Delaware. And again, through all of my research and all of my experience through other states and other jurisdictions, that's where you fall into a personal service, because you're getting a service that relates to the person. It's not to, you know, I'm not going and buying something, which is a retail service, or I'm not going for, you know, a business that I'm going to, you know, a consulting service. You know, I'm going for something that, you know, is going, you know, for me, to make me better. And that's where those fall into that category. And that's usually where you find those.
Have we massaged this enough?
You tell me.
I don't think we need an adjustment here.
Very good, Rich.
Touche.
You've got personal service under retail services. Was that intended to be stricken
Where?
after you struck out finance, real estate, and insurance? The next words are personal service
Under D.
under D.
Yeah, in a sense, if you have created a special category for it, then this.
Was that intended to be stricken out as well?
It should probably be removed from. Yeah, that looks redundant.
Then it all aligns if you drop the personal service.
No, because to me, it's establishments providing services or entertainment as opposed to products to the general public for personal or household use. So to me, I'm reading it as opposed to products to the general public for personal or household use.
But read forward, hotels and motels, personal service, motion pictures, amusement, and recreation services. Right after finance, real estate, and insurance, which is stricken.
Okay, yeah, we should make that one go. Sorry. I don't know why they duplicated that in the first place. Okay,
And
thank you.
the one other question I had was, B, services, healthcare, I think doesn't, I may just not understand this, but I don't see that category shows up anywhere on the table. Am I wrong about that?
While Janelle is researching that, we're hitting 8:30 right now, and we're at our 2-hour limit.
Is this our last item?
No.
No. Do we want to continue, or do we want to
Yes.
end it now?
I would move that we continue on this.
So if it's
Try to
missing,
exhaust the agenda if we can.
if it's missing, we can add it. I can go back and research. I don't know why. I did not create this table and I did not create that definition. We can go back and research if it just fell off or somewhere in an update, or if it was never added for a reason. I'll take a look at that. I'll have to research that one.
The only thing I would suggest is somehow or other you have to, if you're gonna put health in F, we have to draw some kind of distinction between that health and healthcare in B.
Yeah, I think actually it reads healthcare establishments, no? No, actually, no. No, it's not. So, yeah, it's kind of.
I think we need a motion to continue this meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I would make a motion that we continue it for 20 minutes and then adjourn. So let's expedite this.
Is
Okay,
there a
I
second?
second the motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
That maybe we can, if we hit 20 minutes though, see where we're at.
By definition, we can always revisit
Okay,
our
any
decisions,
opposed?
right?
Any opposed?
No,
Okay,
okay, all right.
unanimous.
So Janelle, you're gonna resubmit this next time, is that what, or you want us
You
to-
tell me what you'd like me to do.
Make it an admin. That's what I would say. I don't know if anyone else,
Make it what?
to, approve it as administrative amendment.
Okay, so we vote on it right now.
No, these changes need,
Okay.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, I think we
It
need
needs
to continue this discussion to next
Okay,
time.
so we continue this, all right.
Okay, next item.
Yeah.
Discussion and possible recommendation to mayor and city council regarding HVAC into setbacks.
okay, so also a code amendment. So HVAC, air conditioning units, outdoor showers, propane tanks, trash enclosures are not allowed in your side or rear yard setbacks. They're not. Historically, they've been placed there. So they are non-conforming. So fixing this code fixes a lot of the past and fixes a lot of things going to the Board of Adjustment, which we've had a number of these items go to the Board of Adjustment and be granted variances. And typically, once you see a number of things going to the Board of Adjustment and being granted variances, it's typically a sign you need to fix your code. And it takes care of issues that we see, especially in like some of the smaller lots when you're trying to replace your HVAC, you can't replace it. Or if you need to add a new one, because sometimes you need to add a new one, they don't fit into the side yards. They need to put them into the side yard setback, and you need to be a little bit farther away from your house now. Well, the problem is now they're encroaching into the side yard setback. They cannot do that per the code because there is no exception. So this grants them an exception to encroach 5 feet into their side yard into the 5 yard setback, because again, you have to have a couple of feet. They're usually 2 to 3 feet wide, depending, and you need to have some separation distance from the house because they should not be right adjacent to the house. You need a little bit of a distance, typically, depending on the type of unit. So the suggestion is, the proposal is to clean up the code and to clean up what has historically happened and to allow HVAC, propane tanks, above ground propane tanks, outdoor showers, and some trash enclosures to allow to encroach into the side yard and rear yard setbacks.
I'm confused about the outdoor showers, about why we haven't included that. I understand the potential need for the HVAC. And I understand the idea of the attached trash enclosures, particularly for people who are part-time residents. I think the outdoor showers is a slippery slope that could get very ugly for, if you have someone who is renting your home, the home next door to you, in a short-term rental situation, having an outdoor shower on the, so close to the neighbor, could just be uncomfortable on many levels.
What's the code say about outdoor showers now?
They're prohibited.
Really?
In the
Yes.
side setbacks.
In the side setbacks, they're prohibited.
Yeah, and I think it's like something that you typically would have in your rear yard for privacy.
Oh, a lot of them are in the side yards.
Yeah.
On the side of the houses is where they typically go. And the problem is that they're starting to need, there's a lot of them do currently encroach into the side yard setback. We are not allowing them, we catch them, and the problem is right now, historically, they were allowed, per code, they weren't allowed to, but historically, it happened. So I'm just trying to clean up the code to fix what happened in the past and to recognize and to move forward, so there's, uniformity for everybody. So,
I very much appreciate that, but on the other hand, for new construction, it just gives people yet another way that they can make their footprint just a little bit bigger.
well, it's not the footprint of the house, it's just the
I understand.
outdoor shower.
It's still the footprint, though.
Usually, those aren't coming 5 feet out, they're usually coming maybe a foot or two out into the setback. We could actually, yeah, because I only said those could only encroach 3 feet into the setback, because those don't need to encroach as far, because they don't need as much space.
I have more of a problem with the HVAC encroaching into the setback because those are noisy. And you're imposing upon your neighbors your noise because you can't find a better place to hide it. And, you know, that happened in my neighborhood recently, and people were all upset. They were building this mansion, and they wanted to, you know, put their HVAC in the setback area. And we said, no. You know, find a different way to build your house so you're not waking the neighbors up in the middle of the night, you know?
So typically what we see are the replacement of HVACs that were placed into the side yard setback. And they need to install a new system or add a second system, and they're going into the side yard setback. And that's the problem, is they're already in the side yard setback.
So could you clarify that and just say it's permitted if it's a replacement?
No,
As opposed to in new construction?
it's not a uniformity issue.
Your grandfather issue. May I ask a question, please? One of my concerns about this, and a suggestion I would make to you folks, is to consider the application or the implication of what's suggested here, and get in your mind the image of a multi-dwelling building and how this would be impacted, or how it would impact that kind of a community. Think of the townhomes, and we have more townhomes being built in Lewes and have been built in the last 5 years or so, and about this setback. And also, of course, with any multi-unit building where there would be multiple HVAC systems and where they would be located. It's just, I'd like you to think about that. Because, I mean, we all might think in our minds, our experiences as single-family detached homeowners, what our experience is, and yet there are other people who don't live in such living quarters.
Janelle, I'm gonna use my property as an example. I'm gonna have a building 5 feet from me. That's the setback.
Right.
And that's gonna be a 4-story alley, and I don't want 11 or 7 HVAC units between my house and their building, if I read this right?
Yeah, no, we'll talk about that later. So
Okay.
those will actually be interior.
Okay.
But it's the potential.
But it's the pension, but.
There is.
Yeah.
But they have to go somewhere, and the problem is most of the time, and historically, they have always encroached into most of them have encroached into to a setback. So you've asked me to find an issue with the code, and I'm bringing this to you as this is a problem with the code that needs to be cleaned up because it's a code fix that needs to happen because we have a problem. It's historically been allowed to happen, and the Board of Adjustment has seen multiple of these. For propane tanks, they've been voting to approve them, which means if you're voting to approve more than 1 or 2 or 3, and it's been multiple, then it's saying, okay, you need to fix your code to reflect that. So, and yes, there are some properties that, and you don't have to agree with me that's just historically when I go to learn from my attorneys, that's typically what they're telling you is because the Board of Adjustment is then creating kind of the law going, hey, you're seeing this enough and enough and enough that there's something wrong with your code. And I also know from the number of surveys I see and I sign going, yep, you're okay, except for, that HVAC is in the setback. That HVAC is in the setback because they were issued that way. Or it's like, how do we work with you to figure out how to replace or move your HVAC? And it can become tricky, especially the ones in the floodplain. So it's because those have to be elevated. So sometimes they need to encroach a little bit. So this is why this is coming forward. I've identified an issue that I believe needs to be addressed.
But isn't it best to address those on a case-by-case basis, if that's the case? I mean, it sounds like there are situations where it's appropriate and situations where there isn't appropriate. Isn't that the role of the Board of Adjustments to make the decisions based on that particular application?
If it was 1 or 2 cases, absolutely. This is not. This is a lot of issues throughout the city. This is more of a citywide issue than just 1 or 2 cases. This impacts a larger number of properties than you actually think it does. This probably impacts, probably 30% of the houses in the city, which is a lot of houses.
Can I throw
And
out a
that's me
different?
being, putting that on a low side.
Can I throw out a possibly different approaching it from the opposite direction? When we renovated our house, we ran into this problem. Originally, the way the architect designed it, we were gonna have 2 HVAC units, both on the same side of the house, but and we have an 8-foot setback requirement on the side yard, but because the property line ran diagonally, one of these units would have encroached into the 8-foot setback. And so, and one of the units was larger than the other. And so what we ended up having to do was to take the larger unit and move it to the other side of the house so that it wouldn't encroach into the 8-foot setback. What I wonder is, rather than give permission for a 5-foot encroachment, would it make sense to allow perhaps a 1-foot encroachment?
Yep, that's possible. So under state code, a city could administratively grant a variance up to 1 foot. We'd have to adopt an ordinance for that. That comes from state code. Anything beyond 12 inches has to go to the Board of Adjustment.
Or you could change the 5 to like 3 feet or 2 feet. But yeah, well, because some people have the room, like you were able to move the one on the other side. Because usually the first thing we do, some people
We would
don't.
have preferred to leave it where it was.
Right.
But rather than go through the Board of Adjustment, we say, let's just move it. But
Yeah, unfortunately, some people aren't fortunate and aren't able to move it to the other side or to the back, because that's usually the first thing we try to do.
It doesn't
But
make
yeah,
sense
if
to
you
me
don't
that-
think 5 feet's the right number, you can discuss and come up with a different number. That's
I'm
perfectly
trying to
fine.
address Barbara's point
Yeah.
about you know, on the one hand, providing a little bit of flexibility without sort of opening the door to, you know, hey, let's invite the McMansion problem.
Because, you know, I just want to clarify too. Burton subdivision has the same side setbacks, right?
As everybody else.
Okay, just wanted to make sure of that,
Yes.
because that they weren't smaller.
They're
But
not.
when you look at, and yes, you know what, if you buy a 5,000 square foot lot, then you build a house that fits on a 5,000 square foot lot.
So
It's, you know, it's not rocket science. I don't think that we should be, if people are, there are lots of other things that people do in Lewes that don't conform to code, and we know that. And I realize we're trying to close the loopholes on that by correcting the code, but I don't think we should be opening the floodgates and just allowing this, because I'm also thinking about being on H Park, the historic district.
So I just want to be clear, this is not intended for new construction. That's not where we're running into the issue.
Right, but you're going to have to accept it for new construction if we approve it.
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to just not do this. That would just be my inclination.
It just seems to me that if you have a mechanical failure and you have to replace your equipment, but you can't do it where it is, that's going to constantly lead back to this, you know, the Board of Adjustment going through this harangue of getting through that. You know, to me, yeah, in my house, I had that same issue, but it's not always just where it can fit for the setback. It's also the limitations on the mechanics of how far the effluent can, you know, the fluent can
Correct.
go, the length of the lines that you can put in. And sometimes these are very, very limited, not just because of setback, but because of the conditions, even with a new house. Mine was not a new house. So I hope we can find some way to make this easy and not just say, like in my case, when I raised the house, oh, well, I should have knocked it down and not raised it because I couldn't put my air conditioning where it needed to be. So there's somewhere in here something that we ought to do better than have every one of these go to the Board of Adjustment and not place a burden on the members of the community when they're trying to replace a failed piece of heating equipment, but they can't go forward because they gotta go to the Board of Adjustment. So they're cold or they're very hot, one or the other, waiting. We can do better.
What you're saying in that, if you're replacing, you're grandfathered in, or you need to have the code reflect that? Is there such a thing as grandfathering that in?
Oops, sorry, Blue. So once you remove it,
Yeah,
you lose your nonconformity.
okay, all right,
And that's the problem.
right.
I've taken the equipment out, so I've lost my nonconformity.
Okay.
So now I can't put it back.
My issue
So
with
it's
this
like-
is side yard, not so much rear yard, but.
So maybe it's a different number for the side yard. Maybe it's 3 feet or 3 feet or something like that. Maybe 5 feet's too much. That's perfectly fine. Again, this is,
It's a proposal.
yeah, it's a jumping off point just to get ideas, you know.
And is it possible to somehow write into our zoning, I understand that you don't want everything to go to the Board of Adjustments. And also, it's a burden on the homeowner if they have an emergency situation and they have to schedule into that process. However, there is nothing discretionary that the planning office, or, you know, the building office can do to approve it if there's a replacement? Can we somehow allow that?
So there are certain times of the year, heat is a requirement, and we can issue an emergency heat replacement. We'll have to figure out those details. Air conditioning is not a code requirement, and it is not in the code as a requirement.
Isn't it though a public health issue,
It is
especially when we're
not a
talking
code
with
requirement.
elderly population?
It is not a code requirement, and we can enforce the building code. Having working heat during certain time, during a certain month, certain months, and it's a certain date from, and I can't remember the month, through, I think it's like November or October through, I think, March or April, it's in the code, is when you are required to have working heat. And, you know, there have been times, it's like, they just have to come out and fix it, or they have to put in like a new, you know, boiler or whatever they have to put in. So they're not dealing with the exterior unit, they're dealing with the interior, and they come get the permit after the fact. We understand that. Heat goes out over the weekend. It's an emergency permit because that is a code requirement. You have to have working heat for it to be a habitable house.
Can we
AC is not.
tweak that? I mean, can we just let it fall under HVAC being a need? It is a need for people with medical issues.
That is a building code, and that is beyond your jurisdiction.
Okay.
Could I just ask a question and try to move this along here?
Yeah, because
Based on what you have seen, based on what the city planner has seen, based on what is going to the Board of Adjustment, what would be the amendment that we could make here, the change to ordinance, that would address the vast majority of the problems of the exceptions that are coming through your door?
I think
What would it be 1 foot for backyard, 2-3 feet for a side yard?
I think 3 feet would cover the majority of them. The worst ones have been the 5 feet, but 3 feet would cover, I think, 90% of them.
I have a different approach to this that just came to me, and I'm sorry, it's like one of those on H Park, we get, some things are addressed as chair and staff. And that avoids people waiting for the monthly H Park, and also doesn't waste the time of the H Park commissioners who are, you know, we have 7 applications every time now. Could this not be something, this particular item, replacement of HVAC units, be something that the Board of Adjustments, they have a chairperson, correct?
The Board of Adjustment does not work that way. The Board of
Okay.
Adjustment is quasi-judicial,
Yes.
and they only meet every other month.
So they can't make administrative
They
decisions then
They
like that?
cannot.
Shoot, I was thinking that would be the route.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair, can I make a motion and then try to follow up in the direction that Deborah's headed? Well, we're out of time, so I was going to make a motion to extend time. My motion would be we extend time another 20 minutes.
Can I amend that? I think that, I mean, this is just my sense, is that we're running out of steam here. And I would like to postpone the discussion on the comprehensive plan to the next time, perhaps even the discussion on the next code clarification, and go to reports and just, and make this for 15 minutes. I am concerned that if we run these meetings too long, we're gonna really burn out some of our members here. And I think that we need to just get some discipline into how we structure and run these meetings.
Okay, we have a motion to continue the hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is that the motion
I think-
presented by?
I don't think my motion got a second, so.
Are we at 20 or 15 minutes?
Just not a second. So let's vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 But the motion was to skip
No.
things and move.
No, that was a friendly amendment.
Extend-
So it's up to the chair if she wants to move
Yeah.
on to something else.
Okay, so it's, the motion was to extend the meeting another 20 minutes.
So we vote.
And have we voted?
No, we have not voted yet.
All those
Yeah.
in favor?
Aye.
You did.
Aye.
We did.
You did. It was a unanimous vote.
No, I voted no.
Oh.
I mean, I want to make a motion.
No,
And
I agree with you.
my motion is that we recommend to the council an ordinance that pursuant to 22 Delaware Code, Section 327A3, an ordinance that would give the city planner the authority to administratively grant a dimensional variance for HVAC, mechanical equipment, and tanks in side and rear yards that
Up to
do
what?
not exceed 1 foot
Yeah.
of the required dimensional restrictions.
Yeah, okay, so that's what we can do, yeah. I second that motion.
Hey,
And
Alex has a.
So would you like that specific to HVAC, or we could do it dimensional in general?
Well, I want to do it specifically HVAC, mechanical equipment, and tanks, because there was a separate discussion about showers, and I had some other thoughts about trash enclosures. So I just want to keep it to HVAC right now and tanks, because that's what we've been discussing. And my main thought would be, let's crawl before we walk, let's walk before we run, let's see how that works out. Janelle can come back to us in a year and tell us how far we've gotten with resolving this Board of Adjustment issue. Maybe we need to make more changes, maybe we don't. But let's start with 12 inches and see where we go from there.
Is there a second?
Yes, I've already seconded, yeah.
Okay, discussion?
I think it's a great idea.
Me too.
discussion is that I thought that we heard from our city planner that 3 feet would be, solve the vast majority of the issues here.
Yeah, but here we were going through a completely different approach, an administrative approach, not a code change approach. So basically, the motion in front of us is to allow administratively the city planner to grant an extra foot into the setback. Then if we want to take 2 more feet to go to 3 feet, then that's a different process. So,
Okay.
That was- that
but
was-
so the motion that we have right now is what.
Let's see what
already is.
experience tells us to begin with, and if the city planner comes back and tells us the Board of Adjustment is still getting lots and lots of applications, we'll come back and revisit it over time.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, Tim?
I just want to ask one quick question. I think I can answer it myself, but I want clarity. On this line, HVAC, mechanical equipment, and tanks, does mechanical equipment include swimming pool, pumps, and the infrastructure needed to run a swimming pool?
No.
Okay. I would encourage you all to think about that, and if it's possible to include that in this line that you're, this, what did you, motion,
Empowerment.
you might want to think about it. That's all.
If
Thank you.
if I have permission to amend my motion?
No, that's actually, swimming pool equipment's covered in swimming pools and swimming pool equipment.
But this title of this table is permitted projections into required yards. And that's, okay, I'll leave it to you to figure that out, but I don't understand why
Is that on a different
that
table?
kind of equipment would not be included.
Is that on a
When you have
different
other
table,
types
or-
of projections listed, but it does not include swimming.
Because it's part of a swimming pool, and swimming pools are considered part of the accessory structures and accessory building and structures in swimming pools.
I understand the swimming pool setback for the swimming pool function, but for its mechanical equipment.
It's 3 and 5 feet already.
Okay,
Yeah, it's covered in the swimming pool
Sorry,
section.
thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
Hopefully that helps.
Okay.
I hope it does. Yeah.
I'm concerned that 1 foot is not going to provide adequate room for any equipment.
All right.
So I think it would be pointless to do just 1 foot.
I agree.
Well, let's vote on the motion and those who don't.
Okay, let's
turn
vote
it-
on the
turn
motion.
it down and that's it.
Okay, let's vote on the motion then. All in favor?
Well, I'm voting in
Aye.
favor of it.
Okay, all opposed?
Nay.
Nay?
So what's the outcome here?
There's
4-4.
four nays.
I don't know where we are.
Ah, so what,
5 to 3.
No, there are 4.
There were 4.
so what happens in a case
It's
like
a
that?
tie.
5 to 4 passed, I believe.
Yes. Because there's 9. There's 9. You have
5
9
and
today.
4.
5 to 4. So
5 yes, 4 no.
it passed.
Okay, let's,
Can I just, for the record, get who voted against? Okay, so
Rich.
Bill,
Melanie,
Kevin,
Kevin, and Bill.
All right, so.
thank you. It's just gonna help Jackie do the minutes. Thank
Right.
you.
You got a foot.
Not
Okay.
yet, no. It actually has to go to mayor and council,
you're
and
right.
then they have to
You got a
approve it,
foot
and
in the
then,
door, let's say.
that's it,
Let's
code
move
change.
on.
Okay, let's go to reports then. I think that's what we agreed
Oh,
to.
we're going to eliminate the,
Yes.
okay.
Okay, so Environmental Subcommittee,
Because I have no report, I'm saying in advance.
okay,
They have not met since the last planning commission meeting, I don't think.
okay. So there's no report from H Park. Amy Marasco is not here. Tim, anything from the
Yeah,
council?
I'll do a quick update. At our last meeting, held on Monday, the March 10th, we took up several ordinances which originated from this committee. And one of them was the business of the lighting ordinance. And the critical thing that you need to understand, and I'll do this as cryptically as possible, is that this is going to be taken up in a workshop, a mayor and council workshop. It was originally scheduled to be held on the 27th of this month. I learned today that there's a scheduling conflict with the vendor, the lighting vendor, and he has asked that it be scheduled for April. And so it will be pushed back approximately 1 month. The request that we made was that the vendor and the BPW be present at the workshop, and the vendor was not able to accommodate. We've also asked, related to this there was an issue of the pilot program, an opportunity to study the effects of the dark sky lighting. And one of the suggestions that was put forth by a member of council was that we solicit interest amongst the different HOAs to see if they would have interest in allowing a pilot to be actually conducted in a residential application that way. So that's a little more detail than you need to know at this point in time. But anyway, we'll be putting that off into April, and then you can expect that it will be remanded back to the planning commission after we go through that workshop. You should anticipate that. There was the open space ordinance, that did pass by unanimous vote. And we have a hearing date set for Overfall Preserve, and that is set for March 31st.
What time?
5:30.
5:30, wasn't that? Yeah, and that should be held here in the Rollins building, Rollins room as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Alex, anything?
I don't have anything this week.
Okay. Barbara, BPW?
Oops, the BPW held a workshop on, was it Tuesday? Was it last night? Oh, geez. And we presented, the two options we're considering now for the future of the discharge and treatment of wastewater for Lewes. And you can probably read all about it in the Gazette Friday.
Okay,
And also, Robin Davis is now general manager.
excellent. Okay, thank you. Janelle, anything?
I don't have anything, thank you.
Okay. Public comment?
Yes, Stephen Matthews, 405 Savannah Road. I would like to speed read the statement I made at the City Council workshop. I wholeheartedly approve of the change from the original list of approved businesses to the new impact rating system, including the proposed administrative process for our higher impact businesses. However, I feel the subcommittee took a step backwards in requiring that same administrative process for animal businesses, especially in the low impact category. I wonder, when does a business become an animal business? Pet grooming and dog training seem fairly straightforward, but what about a baker that added dog treats to the menu, or a fashion designer that makes a dog suit for a wedding, or an estate planner with a client who leaves everything to their four-legged friend? Would this trigger the administrative process? By specifying the approved clients of a business, you are encouraging people to monitor their neighbors and track visitors, which does not sound very neighborly to me. You've switched from a list of allowed businesses to a list of allowed clients. In general, I don't see the need to single out animal-centric businesses for special considerations, and I ask that they be removed from both low and potential impact home occupation types. Either the business is low impact or it's not. Any business operating within Lewes does so at the pleasure of the city, as evidenced by the business license process. If a business receives legitimate complaints, then their business license is in jeopardy. This puts the onus on the proprietor to ensure they are good neighbors, which is where it should be. The repeated concerns voiced by others, noise, parking, operating hours, etc., already have existing processes to address them, such as building permits, parking enforcement, and noise complaints. Let the city trust in its own processes and let people work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, any other public comment? Blues, anyone online? Okay, thank you. Oh,
Sorry, I do. I was making sure, Cynthia wasn't gonna make a comment. All right, sorry.
name and address, please.
My name is Sarah Prieto, and I am at 405 Savannah Road. As Kevin had once mentioned in this actual meeting, that the new home business law was to be generalized for all businesses, but not for this one specific application. But by requiring the administrative process for home businesses working with animals is going against what he said, and is an attempt to appease our 3 non-full-time resident neighbors. By their actions, we can assume that they are against any business we would attempt to operate. As I have already been harassed by the city code enforcement had sent a cease and desist order, which resulted in an inspection of our unfinished basement, proving that there is no business, there never was, and no improvements have been made. This was after my friends had visited me with their dogs for social visits. This odyssey is forcing us to explore the full utilization of our limited commercial historic zone property, to include fully converting it to a commercial usage for such things as professional offices, like an outpatient clinic or criminal defense attorney. We would like to keep the house a home, but don't need to do so. And by removing the animal administrative process, we can keep the house a home. Further, this keeps the new code focused on the type of business and not the type of client. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think that is it. So do I have a motion for?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, I would just like to welcome Alan Roth to the Planning Commission.
You're already coming anyway, so it's nice to see you on this side of the table.